Chapter 11. Olenna Lannister, Tar. Olenna Lannister, daughter of Titos Lannister and Jane Marbran, sister of Tywin Kevin, Jenna and Tyrion Lannister, widow of Roland Tremaine, wife of Euron Greyjoy and White, mother to Arthur, Rhaenyra and Dystone Tremaine, had been sentenced to death. Her trial had been swift, despite the fact that she had refused to recognize the judge's authority on Juan. The matter, she hadn't even come to court to offer a defense nor hear the verdict when it had been given. Instead, Olenna had stayed in her cell where she had been kept since she had been imprisoned. Ladies loyal to House Stark had been put in place to keep tabs on her. Every word that Olenna had spoken had been reported back. Her rants about how she would avenge her fallen house. Her deranged whispers about how the gods would not allow it to rain. Until she was released from her prison. Olenna had been treated well, given her station. There was no one that could say that she had been left to rot in the cells, especially given her acts of treason against House Stark. The evening before she had dined upon the finest of goose, she had drank wines that she had brought with her to Pike. Her confessor had been in that morning to speak with her. She had spoken her truth, and she prayed that the gods would be kind to her. Olenna still had hoped that she would be exiled for her actions. The ladies around her did not speak. For the most part, they were here to keep her comfortable, and the days dragged on as she awaited her execution. Staring out of the window of her cell, Olenna couldn't help but ponder the life that she had lived, and the future that she might have had if she'd not been married to Roland Tremaine. Olenna always felt that she had been wasted on such a match. She should have been married to a great lord, who would have afforded her the greatest luxury in life. The door, too. Her cell opened and Olenna turned away from the window. She was dressed in Lannister red. She was born a Lannister, and she would die as one. "Madam, the hour approaches. You must make ready," Sir Roderick stated with a grim look on his face. It had been he that had been charged with looking over Olenna's care since her imprisonment. Olenna stood from her seat. She clasped her arms before her and her lips pursed as she watched the man that had been her jailer since this mess had started. It had been Roderick that had brought her the news that she was a widow once more, that Euron had died on the battlefield when he had mounted his final stand against his niece, who had brought the Northern Army with her. "Acquit yourself of your charge, for I have been long prepared," Olenna instructed. She was ready to die and had lived a life that she did not regret any of her actions. A part of her still didn't believe that this would happen, that at the last moment Rhaenyra would step in to stop her mother being executed. She would be sent to Bravos in disgrace where rare. She could plot her revenge. "The Queen asks that you take this purse. It has 20 pounds in it to pay the headsman for his services," Sir Roderick stated, knowing that everything had been arranged. It had been a long time coming, but Olenna would pay for her crimes against the crown. How many people had lost their lives because of what she had done, the lives that had been destroyed, because she had poisoned her first husband and refused to aid the Northern Army in its time of need. Olenna took the purse, feeling the weight of the coins inside. Perhaps this was the money that she would be used to pay her way to Bravos. Olenna and the ladies followed Sir Roderick out of the cell. They were followed along the way. The halls were quiet as they walked from the cells and out into the courtyard. Olenna paused as she stepped out under the gray skies. The courtyard was empty apart from the platform that had been erected in the center where the executor stood. "A royal execution. Rhaenyra grants me this dignity at least," Olenna stated humorlessly. She was surprised to find that there was no audience for her execution, her hopes rising, that they would instead banish her and instead execute some peasant. Surely if there was no witnesses, then this was her chance to flee, that Rhaenyra would not go through without ordering her own mother's execution after all and bringing bad luck upon her family. Olenna and her ladies made their way over to the execution platform, her ladies sticking close to her as Olenna climbed the steps and made her way towards the masked executioner that was waiting for her with his assistant. There was a chill in the air, winter creeping up on them quicker with each passing day, and Olenna paused in the middle of all the platform for a moment before her ladies stepped forward to take her fur-lined red cloak from her. Olenna tried to keep her hands from shaking as she stared at the executor. She held the coin purse tightly in her hands as she looked around waiting for some sign that she would be released. It was then that Olenna saw Rhaenyra, dressed in black with a black cloak around her, her head covered as she stood away from the platform. Robb had tried to talk her out of watching, that she didn't need to do this, but Rhaenyra had insisted, saying that she needed to see this to the end. If she was going to sign her mother's death warrant, then she had to watch the deed being done. The mother and daughter stared at one another. neither saying a word while everything that had transpired crossed their minds, only thinking of the other's faults and betrayals. Arlena then realized that this was happening, that there would be no last-minute reprieve, and Senora wouldn't allow her to escape to Bravos like she had thought she would. Nodding her head, fixing her hair as she moved towards the executioner and handed him his fee. She moved to the center of the platform again and held her head high. Senora tried to look away, the guilt of what she was about to do bubbling in her stomach, but for the sake of her children and their safety, there was nothing that Senora wouldn't do. For them, Carlin, Osric, and her unborn child, they were her future, one that her mother threatened just by living. For that reason, she had affixed her signature to the execution. Warrant? I'll. Don't close your eyes, Arlena said, staring at Senora. There was no hesitation in her movements as she got down on her knees. She clasped her hands in front of her, her eyes locked with Senora's, hoping that this moment would haunt her. The House of Lannister would end with her. She might die, but she hoped that in her death it would curse all those who had brought her family to its knees. Because you know what you do this day, Arlena spat. Senora would be forever tainted for her actions, and her children would pay the price for it. Carlon, Osric, and the baby that the Beat Senora carried in her belly would never be safe. A lump formed in Senora's throat. She willed herself to keep watching, and she wanted nothing more than to look away from the sight of the executioner picking up his sword. Arlena prayed under her breath, not daring to look towards the man that was approaching her, knowing that she wanted this to be over quickly. She did not wish to suffer more than needed. It would be over quickly and cleanly. So witness it, Arlena ordered. She raised her head, giving the executioner the perfect angle to strike, her eyes never leaving Senora's as the sword swung and cut off her head. Senora felt her knees buckle and collapse under her, tears in her eyes as she hugged herself closely. She took deep breaths as she tried to wrap her head around the fact that it had happened. Arlena Lannister, daughter of Titos Lannister and Jane Marbrand, sister of Tywin, Kevin, Jenna, and Gerion Lannister, widow of Roland Tremaine, wife of Euron Greyjoy and mother to Arthur, Senora, and Destone Tremaine, was dead. Senora closed her eyes, fighting back the tears, knowing that she shouldn't grieve the woman that had betrayed her entire family and had caused her nothing but pain. There were footsteps behind Senora, and she should have known that he would be here to support her. Robb moving to hold his wife. He couldn't imagine what she was going through right now. The two of them were silent, while Arlena's body was carefully moved into the coffin that had been prepared for her. She would be sent to Casterly Rock to lay with her family that she had loved so much. That would be the only kindness that they would allow her. It was on Tyrion to ensure her burial and the transport. The Starks and Tremaines were washing their hands of her. Robb helped Senora to her feet, the two of them sharing a look before Senira hugged her husband, both of them knowing that Arlena was just one of the problems that needed dealing with. Now they could focus on what was coming from the north and the Dragon Queen across the sea.